The moment you begin explaining your boundaries to someone who keeps stepping over them, something subtle shifts. You believe you are being mature, calm, reasonable. But what you are actually revealing is how much you are prepared to tolerate. The wrong people do not misunderstand boundaries. They measure them. They notice how many times you will repeat yourself. They calculate the price of ignoring you, and if that price is low, they cross the line again. Think about how many times you replayed the conversation afterward. I should have said it better. I should have explained more clearly. I should have stayed calmer. Yet the result never changes, because the problem was never your explanation. It was your expectation. Stoicism teaches something both uncomfortable and liberating. You are responsible for your character, not for persuading others to respect it. You control your response, not their behavior. The moment you stop bargaining with your dignity is the moment your power starts returning. If you are here, it is because part of you is exhausted from performing strength and ready to embody it. If you value clarity without cruelty, boundaries without bitterness, and discipline without drama, you are in the right place. Consider subscribing, not as a favor to this channel, but as a commitment to the version of you that refuses to live as a reaction ever again. Disrespect is not random. It is a test. When someone interrupts you repeatedly, makes subtle jokes at your expense, dismisses your opinions, or keeps pressing your boundaries in small but deliberate ways, they are not simply careless. They are observing. They are gathering data. They are asking a quiet question without saying it out loud. How far can I go with this person? And the way you respond becomes their answer. Most people assume disrespect is emotional. They believe it comes from anger, confusion, or stress. Sometimes it does, but often it is strategic. It is a probe, a small push to measure resistance. When there is no resistance, the push grows stronger next time. Think about the last time someone crossed a line with you. Maybe they spoke over you in a meeting. Maybe they laughed at something personal you shared. Maybe they made you feel small in a room full of people. What did you do? Did your heart race as you fired back in anger? Did you try to explain yourself calmly so they would finally understand? Or did you lower your eyes and stay silent, hoping it would pass? Every reaction teaches them something. Anger shows emotional investment. Silence shows fear of conflict. Long explanations show a need for approval. And the need for approval is the easiest handle to grab. Much of the pain in these moments is not only the insult itself, but the story you tell yourself about what it means. That story drives your reaction, and your reaction becomes the blueprint they study. Need is leverage. The moment someone senses that you need them to see you as good, reasonable, or worthy, the balance shifts. You may believe that if you explain yourself clearly enough, respect will finally appear. But if respect depended on explanation, it would have shown up by now. When you over-explain, you are not reinforcing your boundary. You are softening it. You are quietly signaling that your limit is open for discussion. That is why the disrespect continues. It is not confusion, it is feedback. The more you react in predictable ways, the more predictable you become. And predictability hands control to the other person. This is where a quiet, internal shift begins. Instead of reacting like a student being graded, you start observing like the examiner. You notice patterns. You stop asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" and begin asking, "What are they trying to gain from this?" Attention, superiority, a reaction. Once you see the pattern, your emotional temperature changes. You are no longer trapped inside the moment. You step outside it and study it. When you pause, even briefly, you interrupt the test. You stop providing instant data. There is strength in that pause, not loud strength, quiet strength, the kind that does not need to announce itself. When someone makes a cutting remark and you do not rush to defend yourself, something subtle happens. You are not submitting, you are evaluating. You are deciding whether that comment deserves access to your mind at all. When you truly understand this, disrespect loses its sharpness. It becomes information rather than injury. You begin to see that the person testing you is revealing more about themselves than about you. Still, discomfort can remain. Sometimes their words land close to an insecurity you already carry. That is why certain insults sting while others feel empty. Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." When someone's disrespect cuts deeply, it often touches a wound that has not fully healed. Recognizing that is not weakness, it is clarity. When you know where your sensitive points are, you become harder to manipulate. You stop reacting from surprise and start responding from awareness. So the real shift is not about crafting sharper comebacks. It is about changing your internal posture. You stop entering interactions hoping to be validated. You stop assuming fairness will protect you. You begin to see social dynamics as exchanges of energy. When someone disrespects you, they are offering a transaction. They provoke, hoping to purchase a reaction. If you give them anger, apology, or desperation, the transaction succeeds. They feel powerful. But when you respond with calm observation or simple facts, the transaction fails. The energy they expected never arrives. And that absence speaks louder than any argument. This does not mean becoming cold or unkind. It means becoming deliberate. You choose when to engage and when to disengage. You respond with clarity, not emotion. If someone says you never help, you state what you have done. If someone says you are too sensitive, you acknowledge their opinion without adopting it. You do not try to convince. You do not try to win. You hold your ground quietly. Over time, this consistency changes how you are perceived. The test loses its reward, and this is where the deeper theme appears. Disrespect only continues where it finds access. When you stop reacting automatically, when you stop explaining your worth, when you stop needing the other person to understand you, the dynamic shifts. It may not change overnight. They may push harder at first, testing to see if the old response returns. But if your internal posture stays steady, the pattern breaks. You are no longer participating in the script they wrote for you. You are writing your own. And once you begin responding like the examiner instead of the student, the test no longer holds the same power. The first shift is clinical detachment. Not coldness, not cruelty, detachment. There is a difference, and it matters. Detachment is clarity. It is the ability to step half a step back inside your own mind and observe what is happening without being consumed by it. Picture a scientist in a laboratory watching a reaction inside a glass container. The chemicals bubble, colors shift, the reaction intensifies. But the scientist does not panic. The scientist does not take it personally. They observe, they record, they adjust. That posture is what you are developing within yourself. The next time someone disrespects you, notice the first impulse that appears. The mind wants to ask, how could they do this to me? That question places you at the center of the storm. Instead, gently replace it with another one. What are they trying to extract? Attention, validation, control, a reaction. When you move your focus from wounded pride to the mechanics of the interaction, something subtle occurs. The emotional temperature drops. The behavior stops feeling personal and starts looking strategic. And once you see strategy, you can respond strategically. This is where calm begins. When you stop viewing the other person as an enemy and start seeing them as a pattern, the chaos loosens its grip. Patterns are predictable. Patterns can be studied. Patterns can be managed. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that you have power over your mind, not over external events. Realize this, and strength appears. That strength is not loud. It does not argue. It does not prove. It simply refuses to surrender the inner space where decisions are made. Disrespect may still occur, but it no longer controls your response. There is a paradox here. The moment you stop trying to be understood, you become harder to provoke. When you no longer need someone else to validate your character, their words lose their grip. Many conflicts continue because one side desperately wants acknowledgement. They want to be seen as right, fair, or good. That desire is human, but it is also leverage. When someone senses you need their approval, they hold the power. When you release that need, the balance shifts. You are no longer bargaining for respect. You are deciding how much access they receive. This does not mean becoming silent or passive. Detachment is not weakness. It is control. Epictetus once said that it is not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters. That response is the only territory you truly govern. When someone raises their voice, you lower yours. When someone pushes for drama, you respond with facts. When accusations are thrown, you examine them calmly before deciding whether they deserve a reply at all. The power is not in clever words, but in the steadiness behind them. At first, this steadiness may feel unnatural. You are used to reacting quickly, defending yourself, explaining intentions. Clinical detachment interrupts that reflex. It creates a pause, and inside that pause, clarity appears. You begin to recognize the repeated moves, the same jokes, the same triggers, the same attempts to pull you into a predictable role. Carl Jung observed that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it directs your life, and you call it fate. Many people believe their repeated conflicts are bad luck. In reality, they are patterns. When you become aware of the pattern, you step out of the script. Here is the part that unsettles most people. When you detach, the other person may escalate. When the familiar reaction disappears, they push harder. It is like pressing an elevator button that does not light up. You press it again, then again, more forcefully. In relationships, this looks like sharper words, louder accusations, or more dramatic behavior. This escalation is not proof that detachment failed. It is proof that the old reward system is breaking. The pattern is searching for its former payoff. This stage requires discipline. If you return to your old reaction during escalation, the test resets. The pattern learns that it only needed to push harder, but if you remain steady, the energy shifts. The usual methods stop producing results. They may never acknowledge it, but they feel it. The emotional hooks no longer catch, and the dynamic begins to lose intensity. Clinical detachment also protects you internally. When you react impulsively, you often replay the moment later with regret. You imagine what you should have said. Detachment reduces that inner noise. You respond deliberately. Even if the other person remains difficult, you keep your self-respect intact. Over time, this posture becomes natural. Calm no longer feels forced. You listen, you evaluate, you choose. Disrespect may still appear, but it no longer defines the interaction. You are not fighting chaos anymore. You are studying it. And when you study it long enough, you realize that real power was never about changing the other person. It was always about mastering your own response. That mastery becomes the quiet center around which everything else turns. Once this foundation is built, the next shift becomes clear. Detachment is not the end of the process, it is the base. From that steady ground, you decide how much access someone gets, how much energy you invest, and whether the relationship itself deserves to continue. Yes, that is the point. When you stop reacting the way you used to, you disrupt their reward system. For a long time, the pattern worked in their favor. They used guilt and you apologized. They provoked and you argued. They criticized and you rushed to defend yourself. Each reaction confirmed that the strategy worked. It gave them energy. It gave them control. When the reaction disappears, when calm replaces heat, the system breaks. The familiar loop stops producing results. And when that happens, the behavior does not fade quietly. It intensifies. This is not a sign of failure. It is proof that the old strategy no longer works. Think again of the elevator button. You do not assume it is broken immediately. You press it again, then harder, then repeatedly. Only when nothing happens do you stop and choose another path. Human behavior follows the same pattern. When someone is used to extracting emotional reactions from you and suddenly receives none, they do not walk away at once. They push harder, louder words, sharper accusations, more drama. Psychologists call this an extinction burst. In toxic dynamics, it can feel overwhelming. Rumors surface. Old mistakes are dragged out. You may be labeled cold, selfish, or distant. The pressure rises. This is the moment most people collapse. They think they made things worse. They believe returning to old habits will restore peace. But look closely. You did not make it worse. You made it ineffective. The pattern is struggling to survive without the reward it depended on. The discomfort of this stage is emotional. Your nervous system wants relief. It wants the tension to end quickly. Apologizing, arguing, or explaining might calm things briefly, but it also resets the pattern. It teaches the other person that pushing harder is all it takes. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the best revenge is not to resemble your enemy. Staying steady during escalation is not revenge, it is discipline. It is refusing to mirror the chaos placed in front of you. It is protecting your character under pressure. When you realize escalation is predictable, it stops feeling personal and starts feeling mechanical. Carl Jung observed, "What you resist persists." When you push back against someone's behavior with emotional force, you feed it. When you respond with clarity and restraint, you starve it. This does not mean tolerating abuse or remaining in harmful situations. It means that in the moment of pressure, you do not give the exact reaction the other person is searching for. You stay centered, you speak simply, you limit your engagement to facts, and when necessary, you step away without drama. This is where inner discipline becomes visible. Epictetus said that no one is free who is not master of himself. Freedom here is not about controlling others. It is about mastering your own impulses when tension rises. Anyone can stay calm when things are easy. The real test is remaining composed when accusations are loud and emotions are high. That composure sends a message stronger than any argument. It shows that your behavior is no longer shaped by their mood. It shows that your boundaries do not depend on their approval. Seneca wrote that whoever angers you, conquers you. During an extinction burst, this becomes practical guidance. If someone escalates and you lose control, the old pattern wins. If they escalate and you remain steady, the pattern begins to collapse. It may take time. It may require repetition. But human behavior adapts when rewards disappear. Eventually, pressing the same button again and again becomes exhausting. The person either changes tactics or moves on to an easier source of reaction. This stage often feels lonely because you are breaking a familiar rhythm. You may doubt yourself. You may feel misunderstood. But clarity grows in that space. You begin to notice how often your past reactions were attempts to restore comfort rather than expressions of strength. You start to understand that real stability is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not demand attention. It simply holds its ground. Here is the deeper realization. The extinction burst is not only about them, it is also about you. Your own habits resist change. Your mind reaches for the old script because it feels familiar. Remaining steady during escalation is as much about retraining yourself as it is about retraining the other person. With each calm response, you reinforce a new pattern inside your own character. Over time, the spike fades. The intensity weakens. The person either adjusts to your new posture or seeks validation elsewhere, and you stand differently than before. Not louder, not harsher, just steadier. The escalation that once felt like proof of failure becomes evidence that you disrupted the cycle. You did not make the situation worse, you made it unsustainable. From that steady ground, your responses become simpler, not louder. You reduce them to facts. Disrespect feeds on emotion, especially emotional language. Words like selfish, dramatic, lazy, useless, irresponsible are not descriptions of behavior. They are labels. They are designed to provoke. They are hooks thrown into your mind, hoping you will grab them and pull back. When you argue with labels, you step into their frame. You begin debating your identity instead of addressing reality. And once a conversation turns into an argument about identity, it becomes endless. Instead of engaging with adjectives, respond with what is concrete. If someone says, "You never help around here," the instinct is to defend yourself with a long explanation. You list everything you have done, hoping logic will restore fairness. But explanations often fuel conflict because they reveal emotional investment. A steadier response is brief and factual. "I did the dishes. They are in the rack. That is all." No tone, no heat, just reality. If someone says you are too sensitive, you do not analyze your personality or justify your feelings. You pause. You look at them calmly and say, "That's your perspective." And then you return to what you were doing. The energy drops because you did not enter the fight they prepared for. Notice the shift. You did not accept their label. You also did not attack theirs. You stepped out of the emotional exchange. Without friction, there is no fire. Most arguments continue because both sides supply fuel. When one side removes it, the flames weaken. This is not about suppressing your voice. It is about choosing when and how to use it. There is strength in calm facts. There is authority in restraint. There is power in refusing to argue about who you are. This approach feels almost too simple, and that is why it works. Complexity often hides insecurity. Long defenses, dramatic rebuttals, sarcastic comebacks all signal inner instability. When your response is measured and brief, it signals steadiness. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that if you are distressed by anything external, the pain does not come from the thing itself, but from your judgment of it. When someone throws a label at you, the disturbance begins in your interpretation. If you treat the label as a verdict, you react intensely. If you treat it as noise, you remain steady. Even so, some words still sting. That is where the deeper layer begins. Why does a simple insult sometimes feel like an attack on your entire identity? Why do certain phrases echo in your mind long after the moment has passed? The answer is uncomfortable. It is rarely only about the present moment. It is about old doubts, quiet fears, and unhealed insecurities. Recognizing this does not mean agreeing with them. It means becoming aware of your own inner terrain. If someone calls you incompetent and it lingers for days, ask which part of you already felt uncertain. If someone calls you unlovable and it shakes you, notice where that fear already lived. The insult is a trigger, not the root. Once you see that, the words lose some of their power. They stop defining you and start revealing you. Carl Jung noted that accepting oneself fully is one of the most difficult tasks. That acceptance is not arrogance, it is integration. You are not only your strengths, you are also your fears, habits, and mistakes. When you deny those parts, they become fragile. When you accept them, they become solid. When you take responsibility for your own growth, you remove another layer of leverage from the interaction. If there is truth in criticism, you correct it quietly. If there is no truth, you let it pass. The decision happens inside you, not under pressure. Your calm response is no longer just a tactic. It reflects inner alignment. Over time, responding with facts changes the dynamic. The other person senses that emotional tactics no longer move you. The conversation becomes less dramatic because you refuse to dramatize it. This does not guarantee kindness or fairness from them, but it does guarantee that you are no longer pulled into unnecessary battles. Steadiness begins to shape how others perceive you. Labels stop sticking. Provocation stops producing entertainment. Facts are only one layer. Beneath them lies the question of worth. If your sense of value depends on constant validation, facts will feel like armor rather than confidence. The deeper work is building a self-concept that is not easily shaken. When you respect yourself, you no longer need to prove it in every argument. You become selective with your energy. You speak when necessary. You remain silent when it serves you. And that silence is not submission. It is choice. This is how the pattern changes from the inside out. You respond with reality. You examine your own reactions. You strengthen your internal foundation. Disrespect loses momentum because it no longer meets the same emotional charge. And as you continue practicing this steady posture, you realize that facts are not just a strategy. They are evidence of something deeper forming within you. From that deeper ground, the next transformation becomes possible. The more integrated you become, the less reactive you are. The insult that once shook you now feels familiar. It touches the surface but does not break through. Epictetus taught that freedom begins in the mind. He said to make the best use of what is in your control and accept the rest as it happens. What is truly in your control is your judgment about yourself. If your sense of worth rises and falls with someone else's mood, you will always feel unstable. But when your value is grounded in your principles, your effort, and your integrity, outside opinions lose their authority. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing rejection. You begin operating from internal approval. Seneca wrote that whoever angers you conquers you. The same applies to shame. Whoever shames you conquers you only if you accept the shame. When you examine it and find it empty, the attempt fails. The other person may keep speaking, but the emotional impact fades. You are no longer reacting from insecurity. You are responding from clarity, and clarity is quiet. It does not need to prove itself. Over time, this self-acceptance changes how you carry yourself. You speak differently. You move differently. You listen without panic. The urge to defend every point weakens. You care less about how you appear and more about who you are. The shift is subtle but powerful, and others sense it. They notice their words do not land the same way. The old triggers no longer produce the same reactions. This is how deeper transformation unfolds. You do not silence disrespect by overpowering it. You weaken it by removing its fuel. When your identity is not fragile, insults become light. When your value is self-defined, labels lose their grip. The dynamic changes because you changed. And this brings us back to the core idea that has been quietly building beneath everything. The real shift is not about controlling their behavior. It is about stabilizing your sense of self so completely that their behavior loses its power over you. There is one internal decision that changes everything, and it is not dramatic. It does not involve a speech or a confrontation. It happens quietly inside your own mind. You let go of the hope that they will become different. This is the hardest part because hope feels noble. Hope feels patient. Hope feels loving. But placed in the wrong situation, hope becomes a chain. As long as you believe they will one day wake up, apologize sincerely, and turn into the person you wish they were, you remain emotionally invested in their potential. You keep explaining yourself because you hope they will finally understand. You keep arguing because you hope they will admit fault. You keep waiting because you hope the version you once saw will return. That hope ties you to a future that may never arrive. The issue is not kindness. The issue is illusion. When you view someone through what they could be instead of what they consistently show you, reality becomes distorted. You excuse behavior that has already revealed its pattern. You downplay repeated disrespect because you believe the next conversation will be different. And each time it is not, the disappointment cuts deeper. Seneca wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Much of that suffering comes from imagined change. You imagine the apology, you imagine the shift, you imagine the breakthrough. Reality stays the same, but expectation creates pain. Releasing that hope does not make you bitter. It makes you clear. It means looking at the person in front of you and saying, without anger, this is who they are right now. You do not add extra meaning. You do not dramatize it. You accept it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that the people he would encounter might be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, or surly. He did not write this to become cynical. He wrote it to prepare his mind for reality. When you expect a storm to be a storm, you bring an umbrella. You do not stand in the rain demanding sunshine. As long as you expect fairness from someone who has shown you otherwise, you keep trying to educate them. You present arguments, you offer evidence, you attempt to win them over. But once you release the expectation that they will live by your standards, you stop trying to convert them. You adjust your behavior instead. You limit access, you reduce emotional investment. You respond to actions, not promises. The energy you once spent trying to reform them returns to you. There is a quiet grief in this decision. It can feel like giving up. But it is not giving up on yourself. It is letting go of an illusion. Carl Jung said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Seeing someone clearly, including their limitations, is not condemnation. It is awareness. Denial keeps you exposed. Awareness protects you. When you accept the pattern as real, you stop being surprised by it. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you separate what you can control from what you cannot. You cannot control another person's character. You cannot force growth, insight, or accountability. You can govern your own response. When you release the expectation of change, you free yourself from the cycle of disappointment. You stop measuring progress by their improvement and start measuring it by your steadiness. That steadiness becomes your anchor. This decision happens once, but its effects ripple outward. You may still feel emotion, you may still feel moments of sadness or frustration, but the attachment to their transformation is gone. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop fantasizing about the day they finally understand. You accept that their path is theirs, not yours. And in that acceptance, something inside you relaxes. Life after this shift looks different. You become practical. If someone consistently disrespects you, you limit their access to your time and energy. If a boundary is crossed repeatedly, you reinforce it with action instead of explanation. You speak calmly. You step back when needed. You stop trying to rescue the connection. Your peace becomes more important than their approval. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop chasing potential. You relate to what is real. That clarity strengthens you. Disrespect weakens because it no longer finds the same emotional grip. You are not waiting for fairness to appear. You are operating based on what is, not on what you wish would be. That quiet internal decision is the once. It is not loud. It is not announced. It is simply chosen. From that moment forward, your interactions carry a different energy. You are no longer negotiating your dignity. You live as if it is already secure. Once this settles, something practical changes. You become selective with your energy. Not dramatic, not hostile, selective. You recognize that your attention, warmth, time, and vulnerability are not unlimited. They are high-value assets. And like any valuable asset, they should not be given to someone who repeatedly misuses them. For a long time, you may have given freely, believing generosity would create fairness. When generosity meets disregard, it becomes depletion. So you adjust. The adjustment is quiet. If disrespect appears, access changes, conversations shorten, engagement becomes practical. You respond to what is necessary and nothing more. You remain polite but not emotionally open, calm but not exposed. You stop volunteering stories, feelings, and details that can be twisted or dismissed. This is not coldness, it is clarity. Connection requires mutual respect. Without it, depth decreases. At first, this may feel uncomfortable. You may worry you are becoming distant or unkind, but there is a difference between kindness and overexposure. Aristotle wrote that knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. When you know your limits, you protect them. You stop offering parts of yourself to those who handle them carelessly. This is not revenge, it is responsibility. Punishment aims to hurt the other person. Protection aims to preserve you. From the outside, both can look similar because access decreases, but the intent is different, and intent shapes your demeanor. When you protect rather than punish, your tone stays steady. There is no bitterness, no need to explain. You simply align your behavior with reality. You engage at a level that feels safe and respectful, and no deeper. Here is the final shift. When people realize they can no longer provoke you, many stop trying. The reward disappears. The jokes fall flat. The accusations no longer spark debates. The drama loses momentum. Some move on to easier targets where reaction is guaranteed. Others begin to show a different form of respect. Not warmth, not admiration, but restraint. They sense that your boundaries are no longer flexible. Marcus Aurelius once wrote that the best revenge is not to become like your enemy. That idea carries more power than it first appears to. You do not need to threaten. You do not need to dominate. You do not need to raise your voice or prove a point. You simply refuse to reflect the behavior placed in front of you. When someone realizes their tactics no longer create emotional chaos, they sense that the dynamic has shifted. You are no longer playing the same game. Carl Jung observed that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. When you stop negotiating your dignity, you move closer to that version of yourself. You stop shrinking just to keep the peace. You stop stretching yourself thin to earn approval. You begin standing in your own shape, without apology. That steadiness carries weight. It may not be praised, it may not be celebrated, but it is felt. People can sense when you are grounded in your own value. Mastery at this level does not mean suppressing emotion. It means choosing your response with intention. When you become selective with your energy, you demonstrate that mastery. You decide where your time goes. You decide who receives your warmth. You decide how deeply someone is allowed into your inner world. That decision is power. Not loud power, quiet power. Seneca wrote that you should associate with people who are likely to improve you. Selectivity naturally moves you in that direction. As you pull energy away from draining dynamics, you create space. Space for healthier relationships, space for personal growth, space for calm. When the constant emotional turbulence fades, you begin to notice how much noise you were living with before. Peace stops feeling rare and starts feeling normal. This is how the internal decision shows itself externally. You do not announce it. You do not debate it. You live it. Conversations change. access changes, expectations change, and over time, the entire pattern reorganizes itself around your steadiness. Some connections may fall away, others may settle into a healthier form. Either outcome is fine, because you are no longer operating from hope, fear, or the need to be validated. The key is that you have to mean it, not as a strategy, not as a temporary experiment, as a decision. Once you fully accept that people are who they consistently show themselves to be, once you stop bargaining for fairness, once your self-worth is no longer tied to their mood, the game changes. And it changes because you changed. Make that decision once, internally and completely. The shift will be felt, not because you demanded respect, but because you embodied it. Not because you fought harder, but because you stood firmer. And when you stand that way, toxic dynamics lose their leverage. Everything else unfolds naturally from there. The day you stop explaining your worth is the day your life becomes quieter, not because the world suddenly becomes kinder, but because you become unshakable. You are no longer negotiating your dignity. You are no longer reacting to every provocation. You are standing on something solid, and when you stand there long enough, the noise fades. If this spoke to something inside you, there's another video on the screen that goes even deeper into building this kind of inner strength. Watch that next. Keep sharpening your mind, keep strengthening your character, and thank you for being part of Stoic Journal.